Hi, everyone. My name is Angel Borrelli, and welcome to Season 9, Episode 3 of the FIX. And a very special welcome to Coach Larry Owens, my personal baseball aficionado and the baseball mind that represents all of you listeners to make sure that what I teach is clear and understood. Good morning, Larry. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Angel. Doing great. How about you?
Oh, I'm great, and it's so nice to have you. So anyway, let's jump into the show. Just a few things I want to lay out where we're going because this topic is very near and dear to me. Today's episode is about what I think is the true power skill of the pitching motion, which is rotation of the hips and trunk. If you ask any hitter, he's going to tell you the power comes from the rotation of the hips and trunk. And because it's kind of easier to see in hitting, people don't understand that it's actually the same thing for pitching. There'll be a number of segments today's show. So if you start feeling lost, don't worry. We'll be making things more clear as the moment goes on. We will be starting with actually seeing the skill in action, and then I will proceed to breaking it down into all its details. After that, I'm going to show you some drills so that you can actually teach it and give your players an opportunity to learn the skills, followed by some troubleshooting tips. And then I also want to add one of my favorite strength exercises for rotation. And to see all the photos and videos for today's podcast, you can go to Angel Borrelli Pitching on YouTube to listen and see what you're hearing. And by the way, because this subject is so near and dear to me, as I mentioned, it's because it was the first book I ever wrote. So in order to kind of say thank you to you for being listeners and also to be an actual great supplement to this episode, if you go to my website at Angel Borrelli Pitching and enter the code S9E3, that's S is in season 9, E is in episode 3, you will be able to purchase my digital download book called Pitching Velocity for $27 versus its usual $47. This sale lasts forever. So no matter when you stumble onto this podcast, the discount is for you. So anyway, and I'll repeat that at the end in case you lost that. Okay, so let's get started and let's take a look at this very first photo. And Larry, I could not have a section or an episode on rotation and separation without putting up Aroldis Chapman. In my sessions, I've had this, I left the title bars on for a reason. Look at that date. In 2015, there weren't as many guys throwing 100 miles an hour, right?
Correct.
Right. But he was like the most amazing, right?
He was the hardest.
Yes. And also I did this for you, Larry, because he's a lefty.
I hate him.
So I didn't want you to have to transpose everything. So I thought I'd be nice to you at the beginning.
Make it easy on my brain, too. Huh?
Yes. So what we're going to be talking about is, and the reason I've had this on my computer and when I'm teaching, and if ever a topic of rotation comes up and separation, which is what you're going to be understanding soon, I always put this up to show them. And I think it's always great when you can actually see what does it look like by somebody who's actually in a game doing what he does. So the rotation phase of the pitching motion, and I have plenty of stuff to review this with, but just to show you how good he was and is, the rotation phase starts when the front foot lands, and then the back hip starts to go forward. That is the beginning of the rotation phase. And the rotation phase has 3 moving parts. It has the hips, it has the lower trunk, and the upper trunk. And the upper trunk is really what we were talking about in the last episode. It contains the shoulder girdle. It contains the shoulder joint. And the rule about it is those are the segments. They have to be sequenced. In other words, you can't go do the trunk before you do the hips, even though that is a problem that young kids have. You want to go in order: pelvis, lower trunk, upper trunk. And you want them to be separate from each other. And the separation is because what we're trying to do is pull all the muscles apart. And so if you let the top one stay back, when the bottom one goes, then you're getting the full length of the muscle. And what you're doing is actually stimulating things inside the muscle, not only the stretch factor, the range of motion factor, but you're exploding the ability of the power to develop. So when you get to acceleration, that's what you're using, that you're passing through the shoulder into the elbow and wrist. So the reason why I love Araldus is because look at the first photo on the left, Larry. That's the moment he starts to go forward. Look how far back his arm is.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So when you look at that part of his belt that you can see, the little black part, and you follow your eye up to where his shoulder is, under his shoulder, you see his shirt, all those wrinkles in it. He's pulling. So what he's getting is one end is going one way and the other end's going the other way. So the pelvis is going forward, the shoulders going back. And I'll be talking about this in some of the videos I'm going to show you. The separation he's getting there is major. And the fact that he's getting it right away is crucial, because in those three segments, you want the first one to go full range before the second one goes. That's how you get maximum power development. So you can see here, what makes him great is that first move right there, the initiation, but the separation. Now, look at the second photo. Look at his arm, how far away it still is from his hip. He's starting to get square, but he isn't square yet, but his lower trunk has started to come in. Can you see that separation, Larry?
Absolutely. You can tell by looking at his belt or, his rear. You can see that he's in a different position than he's already started to rotate, and his shoulders or upper trunk isn't in the exact same position, but it's still pretty square, what I would call square to the plate.
Yes, he's totally separated. I mean, this is how you throw. You cannot throw into big digits if you don't have separation. Even if you don't have, let's say, the same range of motion, as long as with your range of motion, you're separating and not letting, the intent is not to let each piece go in one piece the way little kids do. I mean, imagine a 5 or a 6-year-old. You give them a ball, they face forward and they just throw, right? And then when he's about 7 or 8, or she's going to use the step forward and bring the back leg. But they don't understand separation. That is a skill that's learned. And like I said, it's the skill of hitting, and it's a little bit easier to picture it. So now we see in the third photo, he's not quite square, but look at his arm. And I know it's hard to see. You have to kind of infer, but his arm is still behind his hip. And the reason why you know that is you can tell his left chest muscle hasn't gotten square yet. And you can tell that he's retracted in that shoulder blade. So for everybody who's listening, I'm going to be making a lot of reference and tying in the first 2 episodes of this season, because the pitching motion, every phase requirement is that the phase prior to it be actually as efficient as possible, and that the phase you're going into, that you have an understanding of where you're headed. So on the first episode, I talked about the stride, because this kind of rotation can't happen if your stride is off. And the last episode was about the shoulder blades, meaning the upper trunk, right before acceleration. If you don't do this phase right, you're going to have trouble with the next phase. And so if you haven't heard those 2 podcasts, make sure you go and listen, because this one ties it all together. So Larry, look in the third photo and you see he is retracted. His blade is back still, meaning his arm is still attached to his body and he hasn't started to rotate. And then that is proven by the last photo where he is square to the plate. And notice that you can see his right leg. For all yes, I know there's tons of pitchers, especially lefties. We would not be able to see that leg. And because of that, I would not be able to show you this squareness, because you can't be square. Just try to be in the position Chapman's in do it just like him. Take your right foot, cross it way over your left one, and try to be in this position. It doesn't work. It can't work. And let's call it just a different style of pitching. And that's why the release point on someone who crosses over is going to be different, because he can't get square like this. So we see now that he got there in 3 different phases. Now, let me show you. Let's look at this next video. And let me show you, and then introduce the model that I have for this whole show. So, first of all, what's going to be playing here is what you just saw, and I will talk it through, and this will keep playing until we finish. So, what we're seeing here, first of all, this is Andrew Hammett. He was a player at College Park High School. He is now, and he was a catcher, not a pitcher. And I purposely asked him to do this for me. He's also a bodybuilder, and it's why I wanted him to do it, because we need to see some anatomy. And also, he was a wrestler. And he is now a JV coach for College Park. And so I asked him if he would do this for me, because he doesn't know this. Of course, he was a hitter, and it comes kind of naturally to hitters. But as a catcher, he never would take his arm that far back. And, they have to get rid of the ball pretty quickly when they're making a play. And so for him, this was a very foreign move. And so I was teaching him while I was doing a video, because some of the problems that he had, or some of the restrictions he had, were actually things that you're going to see. So I wanted this to be really kind of like an even level playing ground, where I'm actually working with someone who didn't know this, just like most of you pitchers or teachers that or coaches that don't understand it. You might be teaching this for the first time. So what we're seeing here is, and I want you to think about what you saw with Chapman, is what we're seeing is that he is rotating his pelvis first. His lower trunk doesn't come right away. He's trying to keep as much of his chest on the ground as possible. Then as you see his chest come through, you see that his arm has not come through yet. So this is in full action. And we'll be breaking this up into still shots in the next view. What you're seeing here is the separation that you saw with Chapman, where one piece comes way before the arm comes. Okay? Okay, Larry, let's go to this photo here called the Introduction to Segmental and Sequential Rotation. Now, this is in still shots, what we just looked at. So again, here's the phase of the pitching motion. So on the far left, called stride landing, I have him laying in a position. Andrew's laying in a position that sort of simulates the way a pitcher looks when he lands. Now you can see his complete pelvis is flat. Now, a lot of guys may not be able to do that. They can't figure out how to get their hip down because of range of motion. They almost have to be taught that. And you do have to ask them to use their glute and try to get straight. But the truth is, and they've just done research on this, if your pelvis can't get that flat to the ground. In other words, when you see the pitcher stride out, if he's got a little bit of a turning to the pelvis, that range of motion, if you start there, isn't going to affect the ending velocity of the ball. They've done research, just came out 2 days ago, saying if the pelvis is a little open, it's not going to affect the velocity of the ball. Now, I haven't dug into that research to say, hey, yeah, that's absolutely correct. But the truth is, some guys can't keep their hips that sideways. But there's a difference. And when you stretch out into the stride and you have your hips, you try to keep the back leg back, but it won't. You don't have that range of motion. There's a difference in that than in thinking you can turn the back hip to get to your front leg, which gives you an artificial length. So you let the pitcher lay on the floor, and with his structure, you get him as flat as possible. So the next phase, and we're going to be into this in more detail. I just wanted to show you the pieces. So the next phase, he lands. The next thing is you want the pelvis to go. And you can see by the stripe on his shorts that his pelvis has started to lift off the ground, and you can see his low back. It's in its correct position, which is what normal people call arched, but it's really in extension, and the low back is supposed to be in extension. And you can see that he's doing all he can to keep his shoulder blades down on the ground. And again, this is someone who hasn't been pitching, so he doesn't have that same range. When my pitchers do this, they probably would have more of their right shoulder down on the ground, but he's doing a great job. Now, the next piece that goes is the lower trunk. And you can see that the lower trunk, you can now see his spine when you're looking at him from this view. And you can see that his waistline started to go. As his pelvis continued to go, he also was creating some movement with his upper body, but he was still keeping the pieces apart. And then the upper trunk goes, and you can see he's totally square facing the other side of the gym. He's stacked up, so you can see his entire spine. And you see that his arm is what in baseball is called the lagging back of the arm. And in science, it's actually called the lagging of the next segment. So he has got his body completely square, but his arm is lagging back. So this represents the three phases of rotation: pelvis, lower trunk, upper trunk. And these phases lead to what the next phase would be called, which is I call it pre-acceleration. It's called in science, when we break it down, we call it max external rotation. It's where we saw Chapman in that last photo. He was completely square to the plate. His arm was in that 90-90 angle, and he had full stretch around his shoulder joint because he's pulling each part, just as you see here. So let's go ahead and open up the next photo. Now, this is the most important part of this exercise. So I call this pitching on your back. And this is an exercise that teaches feel, but more so, it teaches an understanding of what you're trying to do. And then what I do is, and this right now is to teach my listeners the understanding of this. But what we're going to get towards the end is I'm going to teach you how to teach this, and you'll be constantly going back with putting the pitcher on the ground, and he will become better and better at this. And when he can feel this, he has a much better chance of feeling it when he's on his feet. Now, one thing I want you to notice, and this is important, the back foot is very important when it comes to rotation. And we've talked about this before when we talk about the stride. And what you're going to wonder after you see this is, how in the heck do these guys pitch when they pick their back foot up off the ground? Which they do when they cross over. I hate to keep bringing this up, but Larry, you know what I'm talking about. When a pitcher's front leg is too far across his body, when he goes to turn, he knows he's got to get his hip square. He has to lift his foot off the ground.
For sure. That's what I like about the very first picture of this little small segment where it has him laying on his back, the stride landing with his right foot, it's up against a beam, it looks like. But what it forces him to do is he's actually landing even with his back heel, which allows space between his 2 feet or his 2 legs. And then you've put him in the position he needs to be so that he can rotate and get square to the target.
Yes. Now I put them up against this because otherwise I would have to hold the foot down. It's very hard. And everyone, I want you to go home and do this. You will know how to do this by the end of this podcast, because this is actually a teaching podcast. So that foot, and that is the part that he used incorrectly in a number of places. And I already told him, I said, why I asked you to do this? Because you're not doing everything perfectly. Pretty darn good. But there were things like, for example, if I was working with him, I would go back and, teach him the foot. He said, Angel, I think it's genius that you used me, because I'm going to make the same mistakes that someone who doesn't know this part of the motion would make. So this isn't to be critical of Andrew, but it's counterintuitive. So the first part, the initiation of any movement, is the make or break part of any movement. I don't care if we're talking a squat. I don't care if we're talking hitting. I don't care if we're talking your first step off the bag to run. The way you start is critical to letting the rest of the body do what it should be able to do efficiently. And your body's so good. For example, if you get off to the wrong footing, or Larry, I think that this would be correct. Let's say you come off the bag incorrectly and you're going to try to steal a base or do something. Your body is going to figure out how to keep you running, but it might slow you down. So that's why I think you probably spend time with teaching runners how to come off the bag when they're stealing, or how when they have to, when they're running the bases. The first step is critical. So that's true for any motion. So the initiation of the rotation phase, the pelvis, that's where you start to get the pull. So if you see him laying down in this first left photo, he's got his foot for pressure on the ground. Now, he's going to use that foot in this next photo. He's initiating the pelvis. If he wasn't pushing into his ground, and here's what's so cool that he did do, and I gave him no instruction about what to do with the foot. I'm always, when I'm teaching, I want to see what the person does before I start correcting. Notice how in the left photo, his foot's flat against. I said, you got to keep your foot here. I said to him, now, you're going to need to get some force from your foot. And in science, we call this ground reaction force. So the back foot is when the pitcher is, let's say, at the top of his knee lift, he's getting a ground reaction force from the ground. He's pushing down into the ground, and the ground's pushing up against him. And that's how we actually stand up. So when he goes to move off his back leg, there is a certain amount of body weight that's going to be in that push-off position to give himself energy to move his body forward. So here we have Andrew, who I said you're going to need your foot to be connected so that you can move your body. Look how he comes into the ball of his foot. That's exactly what you're supposed to do as you begin your stride. He's not supposed to go sideways off of it like a golfer might. He's supposed to go into the ball of his foot, and on that ball, it turns, and that foot, we would want to see that turning more as more of the segments come in. And that's where I'll be showing you he had a little bit of an issue, but this shows the importance of the foot. So what he did is he pushed into that without my telling him, and that gave him force up through his leg. So we call that the transfer of energy. And now he's beginning the rotation. If he doesn't do this segment right, the rest isn't going to happen. And you can already see that he's getting, look at the top of his white stripe by the waistline. You're seeing that he's getting a nice stretch from there all the way up. You see his lat development all the way up into his shoulder. And that stretch is what you want. And you don't want to give up that stretch. As one segment arrives, you're holding the next segment so far back that that when it moves, the next segment is held back. Okay, let's open up the third photo. It's called number 3, Larry.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and for all the listeners, you don't have to go through this hassle because my wonderful editor takes care of all that for you. So now, now we're seeing, okay, now we're going into the next phases. So in this far left photo, you're seeing that now he's bringing in his lower trunk. So you notice that, if he had jeans on, the pockets are not squared up yet, but they're further moved than they were in the prior photo. And you watch his foot, how he's pushing and using that. Now, in the next photo, you can see more, he's brought in more of his trunk, but he still hasn't brought the arm forward. So in those first 2 photos, his body's moving, but his arm is still staying back, and you can see that he's stretched. That's what we want. And if you take a peek at his foot, you can see he's starting to understand he's going to have to turn that a little bit. And if I were dealing with teaching in the next level of teaching, I would say, okay, now as your hip comes forward, use the ball of your foot to press so you can make sure your pelvis gets square. A lot of times you will see pitchers, their pelvis isn't square, but either their foot came off the ground or they're bringing it off the rubber in a way where they can't get the force against the ground. And that force is going to transfer everything. So you get as much force as you can. And this next phase here that's labeled end of rotation phase, that is where, how do we know it's the end of the phase? Because his body's square. Now, if let's say he's a pitcher and I'm at this place in the lesson, I'm going to show him. I'm going to say, you know what? Your hips aren't quite squared up all the way, but I want you to look at your back foot. Your back foot ran out of power, or you stopped using it to give you the extra oomph, because we literally would want to see that stripe facing the ceiling. Do you see that, Larry?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for all the coaches and pitchers, this is a very important part of the motion. So he still rotated in pieces. He followed all the rules, 3 parts in sequence, completely to the full range, but he didn't have enough power to be completely square. So I can guarantee you, and I think we'll probably see it, as his arm starts to come through, his pelvis will continue squaring up. And in fact, look at to the far right photo. So it's the end of the rotation phase. See how he's bringing his arm through for the acceleration phase?
Yes.
See how his stripe is more to the ceiling?
Mm-hmm.
We would have wanted that position over on the end of rotation phase picture. So that's the importance of the foot. And if you notice, he did figure out he's got to let his foot go a little more, but he's not thinking foot at all. This is the first time this guy's done this, and he knows I'm videoing him. So he was struggling. And on some of these, you'll see his face because he was working so hard. But you see, so that's what you want to watch for. And I do have a drill to teach the use of the back foot for the turning mechanism. So the back foot not only receives energy from the ground, but it sends it up to the pelvis. And you can't really turn that pelvis completely unless you have help from that leg. The other thing I want to say before we leave this photo is go back to the far left photo, Larry. You see how he's starting to rotate square? What's really happening there, and this is critical to understand, he's really rotating over his left leg hip axis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's that. When you land, that foot is on the ground, and the pitching motion happens and occurs over the front leg hip axis. You have to turn around an axis. And if you don't get all the way to the leg, you're going to turn in the middle, which means you're rotating your spine. But you're trying to get your body completely around onto that left leg. So as you scan these 4 photos, he is actually turned more onto his left leg. This is why in the stride episode, we talked about where the front foot lands. For example, once again, let's picture a lefty just for ease of explanation, because more lefties do it than righties. So let's picture the lefty. He takes his right foot out into the stride and he lands way over. Larry, I know you're a baseball guy. Does it make it clear if I say first base side or second base side? Okay.
Absolutely.
Is that the way you would say it? Okay. He lands.
More near. You're talking about him stepping more directly at the left-handed hitter instead of stepping.
Yes, he's stepping to his left.
Correct.
And he's got to rotate to his right.
Correct.
Okay. So his right leg, or no, excuse me. Yes, his right leg goes out. See, I'm doing right now what you have to always do. Blah blah blah. Okay, I'm gonna be a lefty right now. Okay, you step out with your right leg, and you plant it way over to your left side.
Correct.
Then you're going to rotate, but you can't rotate because you got to be square over the axis. So now you have to pick up your back foot. Then your pelvis can get over the axis. But by that time, your arms barely got time to come through. And that's why most of them deliver at a really low arm ball release point. You get what I'm saying?
100% get what you're saying.
That's why, as a teacher of pitching motion, and I've always said this, I don't have the latitude, nor do I want to have it, to say, oh, yeah, step over there and let the body figure it out. I teach, hey, if you want it, just like Chapman, put your foot out so when you turn, both legs are on the ground, because the next thing is you're supposed to go forward to release the ball. That's why the ball comes out of the hand a little sooner on someone who crosses over. And it's why all you guys love it, because the hitter can't see it because it's not coming out at the normal time. So again, the pelvis moving over the left leg is critical. Does all that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I love this. I've never seen, this is pretty cool. Putting him on his back, because it gets everything. To me, it puts him just in a much better position, and a really good position where you obviously can feel these things. I mean, as well as see them, but you can really feel these things. I imagine you can really feel the separation. You can feel. I love the position that it gets his front foot in. It gets it so that he can be square to the
Yes.
plate when he rotates. So I love that.
Yes, because, oh, I see what you're saying. Because it's on the floor, he can't do anything incorrectly.
Correct.
I got it. That's what you were saying, and I heard it, but I'm hearing it in a different way. Exactly. Wow, I never even thought of that. But yes, it forces a correct relationship of the axis of the hip to the pelvis.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That is a great point. I wrote a whole book on this, and this is actually in my book, not Andrew, but when I first designed this, and I'll be darned. That is an element to that I didn't even ever think of. But
Well,
yes,
there you
so
go.
I'm telling
I've
you,
done my job today.
you are doing a great job today. And also, this is a drill. If someone's having trouble feeling the separation of one part over the other, let's say you see the kid bringing his arm through, he's not holding the pre-stretch. As per the last episode, he's protracting too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And when you protract too soon, in fact, I didn't say this in the last episode, but the difference in high velocity pitchers and low velocity pitchers is high velocity pitchers protract later in the motion. In other words, they don't let their shoulder blades go while they're turning. And we will actually be looking at the shoulder blades in this next photo. But so the thing is, let's say you've got a kid who's letting the arm go. You put him on the ground, right on the field. You have him turn into the three phases, and you hold his arm back. And when he starts to get stacked up, and you'll see him try to bring the arm, you don't let him bring it. And he starts to feel that stretch. And where he'll feel it is in the upper lat. He'll feel it in his trunk, and he'll be like, and I go, that. And then you go, that's what you have to feel. The pitcher should be feeling a lot of not stress, good stress, a lot of stretching, and a lot of feel. When pitchers tell me, Angel, you're going to be excited. My lat hurt after I pitched. I go, yay! That means they were literally using it. It is one of the major accelerators of the ball. People don't see that because it's on the back. The chest is on the front. It's easy to get that the chest, brings the arm forward. But the lat goes up and inserts around onto the front of the arm. It is a bigger muscle. So let's look at this next photo, because I can be showing you here. So when you have pitchers that are having issues with the arm not, coming through too soon. In other words, they're not fully winding through those segments. You've got to fully wind through. Stride, then your place, then pelvis. Don't let the lower trunk come. Lower trunk, don't let the upper trunk come. Upper trunk, don't let the arm come. That's the way you want to think about it. Any parts of those, you can lay them out on their back and they'll feel it. So let's look at this here. Now, this is what I was just talking about. And for all the listeners, the last episode was even, I don't know, it had as much detail as this one is having. And a combination of shoulder blade lingo and shoulder joint, etc. But if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. So, Larry, I did this photo thing because I wanted to tie in the last episode. So here we have Andrew. He's down on his back on the left side. And now I have him slowly turning the pelvis. By the way, now he's getting better. He's getting better at this because now he's repeating this for me. Okay, so now his pelvis is going, and you want to see his back. And by the way, when I talk about the back being correct in the follow through, the back should look like that when he's bent over in the follow through, because that is extension of the back. That's the back we're supposed to have when we do deadlifts, when we squat, when we do cleans, when we do lunges, when we run, when we sit. Everybody's going to pick up their body right now. That back should not be round, looking like it's pressing against the ground. So that's normal alignment for the spine. And what that means is all your muscles are contracting and keeping all your vertebrae together. And that's what we want, because inside that spine are all your nerves. So he's got this great alignment here. And that's the alignment a pitcher wants. He wants, when you are lifting your chest up as a pitcher, you are, see all these muscles, you see how long they look?
Yeah.
And as he's turning, how long they look? You want them on length. Because that's how, I mean, if you've got a muscle that's 12 inches long, you pre-stretch it to, let's say, 13 inches, and then you contract that 13 inches, you get a lot of force. Why would you want a 12-inch long muscle to be 6 inches? Because you're slumping over. So the bones keep the muscles on length. So that's why laying them on the ground, they feel the length of each segment. So now we see in the second photo, he's got his hip going. Third photo is bringing the upper trunk. Now let's go back right here. It's easy to see in those first three photos, especially the third one. See how close his shoulder blades are to his spine?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, now where pitchers lose it is right here, and you can see why. When they go to the next place, they want their arm to start coming through. So, of course, I told, by this time I'm saying, Andrew, don't let your arm come through. And look here how he is. Remember, we said he didn't get his pelvis completely square, but square enough. He got away with it because he's laying down. But look how square his upper body is, and see how his arm is lagging back. The next phase, if I had him in actually a pitching arm angle, which I do sometimes, and I definitely do this when they stand up and do this drill. But look at his two shoulder blades. He's completely still retracted.
Yeah.
So if you have that, that means he has not started to bring his arm through yet, and he shouldn't have brought it through yet because he just got his chest through. In other words, the moment before you get ready to throw, you want the chest on full stretch because you're not firing the gun yet. Guys want to fire the gun in the third photo before they're square. So you have to, and when I work with my guys filming on certain things, I have them take their shirt off because by looking at their chest muscles, you can see, hey, when he delivered the ball, did he deliver it from a fully stretched shoulder joint, a pre-stretched shoulder joint? Did he have full stretch before he contracted? And in the third photo is where pitchers will lose it. So Andrew kept it together. He's fully retracted. And now I said, okay, now it's time to use your chest to bring the arm through. See how his right shoulder blade is starting to move apart?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And now let's go to the next photo. And now you will see how it looks when he comes apart. Look in the left photo. Now he's protracting more, and then he's fully protracted when his arm comes through. And you see how his blade has come way over to, you can see how, if we're looking at the photo, it's moved to the left, towards his hand.
Correct.
So that is all that we talked about in the last. Can you see how important understanding these segments and you want full range of contraction of one segment before you let the next one come through. So you lay flat, you start to turn your pelvis, and you don't want any lower trunk, you don't want any upper trunk, and definitely not the arm. Then the lower trunk goes. Then you let the upper trunk go. Then you let the arm come. That's the sequencing. And what you have then, you're dealing now with the perfection of muscle mechanics. You've got muscles that are going to fire. And by the way, they're going to fire in the exact direction that they're stretched in. So when you learn to sequence and stay square, you're going to have consistency of a release point because the muscle puts the hand where you want it to go.
Which leads to strikes or better command.
Yes, over and over again. Yes, if you teach somebody to throw from their trunk musculature, which we talked about in the last segment, the arm is wobbly inside that shoulder joint. So you tell, and this, what this shows is you turn your body. This is a body thing. And rotation is the trunk, which has tons of control because it doesn't have moving parts. So let's open up this last one right here. And this is, again, the video we just saw. Now, do you see how he turned his foot finally at the end of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So finally, we have him actually knowing that, you know what, to be able to do this, I've got to use my foot a little more. I didn't tell him anything. And so there he goes. And now he turns that foot, and see how it ended up turning. It had to turn to get him, to allow him to come completely stacked up. And that's exactly what he did. So kind of an amazing thing, right?
Really cool. Really neat.
Yeah.
Get him out over his front leg. I mean, it's really good. This is pretty cool. I've never seen anyone teach it like this, on the ground like this before. Pretty neat.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Pretty cool.
Okay. So let's get into the video segment where now we're going to talk about, well, how do you teach this?
Okay.
So let's open up this first video. This is my favorite drill. Oh, and by the way, we can open it up, but I want to say something. If you want to look at getting power out of your trunk, watch Mike Trout. What's great about him, he uses his trunk better than, well, they all have to use trunk rotation, but here's what's obvious. He's obviously built and jacked and he trains, but you can see it so distinctly that he brings everything to the ball by using his trunk, which is consistent in its motion. His trunk brings the bat to the ball, not his hands. The trunk delivers his arm. The trunk rotation allows his arms to be part of the bat. And so he brings the arm, which is the bat, to the ball. He is amazing to watch. And the first time I ever really watched him, on a show where they were talking about him and everything, they were saying something. He's just so great. They think he's one of the best players in baseball. But the way he rotates, so for all you guys out there who are hitters and you want to see how it's done, because it's exactly the same sequencing. And by the way, when hitters land with their foot closed, and I just heard an announcer on a baseball show this morning say, when you land, that foot has to be completely closed, meaning it looks like the back one. It's parallel to his back foot. If you notice, the more close the hitter lands, he always turns the foot straight when he hits because he can't get his left hip over his left, a right-handed hitter. He can't get his left hip over his pelvis over his left hip. That's why hitters have moving front feet and legs, and they always end up square. Or they're going to hurt their ankle. And actually, some of them don't, but it is a problem with having complete rotation. You know what I'm talking about when the front foot moves, and when it moves into the direction of being straighter.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah. And that's because you can't get away from it. If you're trying to wind all the way around with your hips, the hips they're located inside the pelvis. The pelvis moves over the hip joint. If you're trying to get that feel for complete rotation, your front leg will have to move. And I don't understand any of that with hitting, and it's not my expertise, but rotation is rotation. And I'm not suggesting to anybody they change what they do with their foot. But you've got to be able to rotate fully through your trunk. And if you want to see good rotation, then definitely take a look at Mike Trout when he's rotating, because you can see power for days. Do you know what I'm talking about, Larry, with him?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Power for days. Okay, so now we're watching Andrew. Look how he's concentrating. Isn't that something? Because he's going, what the heck am I doing? Now, this is one of the first things I had him do. It's at the end of our show, but he's like, what? So you put the bat behind the waistline. You have to learn how to initiate. Okay, so this is for initiation of the pelvis. And that now, so notice, and you tell the pitcher, don't move your feet. The feet are straight, have them underneath his hips. And now this is what I'm talking about. The pelvis rotates over the leg. They're not stuck together. So if a pitcher goes, I can't keep my back hip back if my leg starts to move out. Yes, you can. They're not connected together. Everybody thinks they are. So this proves the point. So this is the first drill that you want to teach. And notice that as he turns, he's initiating with the pelvis. And you can see on his t-shirt, you're getting slight wrinkles right above his belt line because his lower trunk is starting to come with it. As he reaches his full range of motion, the trunk starts to go. And that's so he's getting full range. And you want full range before the next segment goes. Does that make sense right here?
Great. Really cool. Really good way to teach it.
Yes, and I want you to notice that he's using a Louisville Slugger bat that I was given by one of my first professional pitchers. And when I bring this wooden bat out and say, okay, I want you to do this drill with this, they go, Angel, this is your bat? And I go, what? Did you expect it to be pink and plastic? I'm like, I can't believe they're in such shock. So, so anyway, okay, so let's go to the next drill. So we'll see what we've got here. Okay, and now we use that same bat, my famous bat, and we have him start to integrate this, just the beginning, and then he comes through. There you go. So now we've got the integration of the pelvic initiation and then all the other pieces that we were looking at. So now he was on the floor. Now he's doing this.
Is he trying to keep his upper trunk?
Yes, he's trying to come in three pieces now.
As long as he can.
So he got the initiation, and you can see that when he comes through, if you follow the white stripe, you can see his arms are staying parallel to that back wall for as long as possible. And as he's passing through the third base direction, because right at that third baseline is when they want to bring their arms through. Now, as we're watching this, I want everyone to look down at his back foot. When he is turning, he's pressing into the ground. He's learned and figured that out. But see how he has to keep turning on the ball of the foot? He should have been putting a little more power into that sooner. And when he stopped, those shoelaces should be facing the catcher. See how his foot's a little not fully turned? So you've got to learn the back foot. And again, I'll be showing a drill for that. But can you see the separation he's getting from this drill?
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Good for him. Really good for him to feel.
Yes.
And obviously why you're doing it, just so you can feel it.
Yes. And of course, putting the bat over his head and keeping his arms at 90, this doesn't have him thinking about anything else. Plus, what we're working on here is the trunks, the segments of separation. We're not working on any of the arm stuff. But also notice he's staying retracted in his shoulder blades. That's why even when he comes forward, you don't see the whole upper arm coming forward. So
this is great.
Yeah. So let's go to the next drill. And now here's what is the most amazing thing for me to teach. I absolutely love this. So I want you to notice something. I'm having him do just the first motion. So notice that he's getting the initiation from his pelvis. Now his arm, I taught him what stride foot contact looks like in the arm, and I told him how to rotate it. There is a relationship between the external rotation of the shoulder and the internal rotation of the pelvis. There's a simultaneous timing to that. So think about this. We're going to see his pelvis. He's only doing the beginning here. I had him keep repeating this because he has to get the relationship, because as he pulls his hip forward and his shoulders going backward, do you see the pulling that he gets?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Now, let me show you this from the side. This, to me, is one of the most amazing connections. My job is to connect dots between motion and mechanics and hitting and everything. And when I made this connection, I blew myself away. See this right here?
We going to 4?
Yes.
Okay.
So now we're looking at the same drill from the side. Now, what you're going to see is, and this is an important moment, and that's why this is part of teaching this skill. This is a skill. So he's turning his pelvis, which he did with the bat drill. And now he's learning the arm goes back as the hip goes forward. Now, what you can see then is everything pulling. He's getting this long pull. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
If
that's
they
good.
get, and so remember I was talking about you've got to get off to the right start. If this timing is off here, everything's off. So the main thing I want coaches to know and pitchers to know, we know that timing is everything. Most pitchers, Larry, know each piece of the pitching motion. They know what they're supposed to do. But if they don't do it in the right time, and you hear hitters talking about this all the time, they'll say, "Oh, my timing was off." The timing of pitchers is usually off. In fact, when I'm looking at mechanics, the first thing I look for are the individual skills there, or are they there, but they're happening at the wrong time, or they're not there. So when you don't have this beginning phase here, there's nothing else that's going to help you. Now, if you picture he's doing this, and let's say we're going to continue on, his arm would be then ending up as he squared up to that wall, fully in that 90-degree position, because he's going to get the same timing with his shoulder as he's getting with his hips.
Wow. Yeah, this is really good. That's the best one right there. That's, I don't know, to me, that's just super important to be able to feel and understand.
Right. So, and when you have, so Andrew's doing this for me, but he's not a pitcher. But when you put pitchers into this position, have them do it, their eyes open up because they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, they get a feel, and most of them will say, you know what, I never felt that before. Now, here is then where you take it. So you get them doing all those things, then you get them on the field, you put him into this position, and you say, okay, now take the ball, and I want you to make the right hip rotate internally as the shoulder goes back, and then get fully square and throw. So you take it to the field then, or maybe you're already on the field. Maybe you're on the field and you're having them lay down and do this. Then you stand them up and then you have them throw from this position so that they are aware of what they're supposed to do. This is where the pitching motion actually begins to accumulate the velocity that is going to be passed on to the shoulder. The stride doesn't directly feed the velocity if we talk about it in physics, etc. Now, lay people might say, well, no, it absolutely does because you get your energy and your momentum going. Absolutely. And you got to get your head in gear. So in that way, it contributes. But on a level of the muscles, you're really not pre-stretching anything yet. And it's the pre-stretch to the contraction and the stacking of those contractions that stretch everything so the shoulder can be fully stretched. And so when it explodes with all that elastic energy and all the things that each muscle passes on to the segment. So that's why once you teach what we just looked at, you get them standing in the stride position. Now, the beauty of this is when you're done with this, and then you say, okay, now I want you to go ahead and I want you to integrate this. And you might even say, just slide step into the landing, come out of the glove, and do what you just did. If they have a stride that's off or there's something wrong with it and it interferes with this phase, that's when you can say, okay, we got to adjust your stride because you can't accomplish this. So this is another way where it's why I did the shoulder blades first. If you aren't in a good position, you can't do what I talked about in the last podcast with the shoulder blades. You can't create that connection prior to acceleration that's going to give you full velocity out of your shoulder. You can't do it. Now, if you learn this and you go, wow, that really serves the shoulder blades, you go, yeah, now it's happening. But if you go and do the stride and they have their stride off, they'll be like, whoa, this is causing me to pull my arm out too soon, or I can't get square. And now you have the pitcher and his awareness heightened. And that's when the pitcher says, hey, and then you don't even have to make the adjustment. They figure it out. They know how to pitch. Most of the time, they're just in their own way because they don't understand the importance of the body segments. And, and the truth is when I watch, even major league pitchers that have the worst body segments placed in the wrong place, they still get the job done. There's not really a motivation to change it unless the pitcher is actually committed to being better, or if he knows he's not doing the best he can. When I have pitchers, and that's why I love working with guys in their 20s, once they're in their 20s, they want to know, how can I get better? I know I have more in me. And they're not like the 15-year-old who just thinks, well, I can just throw any way I want because I'm throwing strikes. And that's the beauty of when you understand what the body does. Because if something's not right, it won't let you do it in the best way. So this is the next step to teaching. And now we're almost done here. So the last thing I want to show you, actually, I have two more things. So let's open up, Larry. That would be number 6. Now, this is the strength exercise that I love for the trunk musculature. So you put the pitcher down on his back, and this is an exercise that should be an everyday ab exercise. So this is actually called, in golf, it's called the X factor. So in golf, you have to separate two. In any sport with rotation, you can't rotate all at one time. Larry, I know you have young kids, and I know that you also have worked with young kids. You know how they'll come out of the glove and then they just turn the whole body forward at one time and throw?
At one time, yep. No piecing, no separation, nothing.
Yes, they don't even know they're supposed to hold the arm back because it's counterintuitive. I mean, if you're wanting to throw forward, you think you got to get the ball to throw forward right away. So nobody understands it. This is called X factor when you separate like this, and this is an exercise that's a popular exercise. So you lay flat on your back, and you start with your legs up in the air. And if you, for any reason, can't get your legs up in the air, get your hamstring stretched out or bend your knees. But what you're going to see here, so you see how he rotates to his left, and he happens to be a lefty. So he's rotating to his left. He doesn't touch the ground, but he's trying. His goal is to keep the upper body as flat to the ground as possible while the weight of his legs is challenging it. See, the weight, your legs are about a third of maybe a third, 2/3 of your body weight. When you get those legs going over, you're like, his right arm is going to want to come up. Do you know that I never tell these guys to wear stripes when I'm filming them? And look how perfect that gray stripe is to show. It's so funny.
Right.
They're intuitive. Yeah, exactly. So you see on the photo, on the second photo, how stretched out that gray stripe is. That's the pull he's getting in his chest. So he's getting that feeling of elasticity and stretch and full range without letting another segment go. And this, again, helps teach that first segment. And like I said, the first segment's where you want, once you get that feel, and then you've got the shoulder going into external, that's almost going to take care of stretching the upper part back. If they get this feel, they love it. So then you bring the legs right up, and this is hard to do. So he's going up, down, up, down, up, down. So now he brings them back up, and he is still keeping his body steady. And this was one singular video. I just stopped it. So you can see he brought it up. He returned to normal. And then he came down to his right side, which would be the side that he pitches to. This is the way he would rotate as a lefty. So now you see him getting that pull. And you can see his T-shirt there on on his left arm. See those wrinkles in it? That shows you that he's pulling. And so these guys need to understand. So keep the head steady, keep the trunk straight, and you go back and forth with this. This is an amazing exercise. And so it's one of my favorite strength exercises. And then the last thing is, this is how you teach the back foot. This is all you have to do. So this is Joe, who is in the minor leagues right now with the A's. And can you believe he was in probably 8th grade when we were doing this drill? And how funny it is for me to see him. And look, I
How
look.
big was he in 8th grade?
Yeah,
That's not the 8th grade. He had a beard.
Yeah, he's in high school. But actually, the guy on the right you see trying to duck out, that's the lefty you just saw on the ground.
I
Yeah,
got
they
you.
were actually juniors and seniors. But
wow, how about that?
But they look like deers in the headlight, right? But
Yes,
not
absolutely.
anymore. Not anymore. So that drill is so simple to teach. And because you can't see how he's pressing into the cement.
Yes.
And I'm not asking him here to keep separated. This is not a separation drill. This is how do you use the foot in pitching drill. And by the way, I just had to use this drill and to show one of my minor leaguers the back foot because his foot was coming off sideways like a golfer. And I said, no, you got to lift the ankle, get in. You've got to get into the ball of the foot so you can press. That's how you get power. So anyway, that is the end of the video show. Now, do you have any questions, Larry, that helps clear things up?
I think the exercises are very simple. I think it's very easy to understand. The one thing you talked about, I'd have to go back to, I can't remember which photo. Photos 1 through 6, when you were showing Andrew laying on the ground, it looks like in the weight room. You talked about the structure of his back. And you can see his back, and you talked about who's on his back. Or you could see his back, and you talked about notice how straight his back is, or it's in a similar position like you'd use to lift something or to. And the thing I immediately thought of, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, was I've seen a lot of people teach kids how to pitch, and really focus on following through or finishing, and in the process, their face ends up either turning away from home plate or the catcher or looking down. And then that would, in my opinion, that kind of bows or arches your back, but would keep in your face. And that makes it even more important to keep your face, your chin up, and your face looking at where you're trying to throw the ball. I always like to use the key, watch the ball, just watch the ball hit the mitt, throw it, but then make sure you see it hit the mitt. Because I just think it does a lot of things for you delivery wise.
Yes.
So, and it seems like that would, to me, that kind of reassures me and verifies that it's a pretty good thing, because then it also keeps you, it should keep you, if you can keep your face on your target throughout the throw, you'll probably keep your back in a pretty good position as you get out over your front foot as you finish the throw.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Well, you're actually bringing up something really important that I didn't even think of bringing up for this. So I'm giving you another gold star today.
Hey, it's good. Hey.
So the funniest thing I do with my pitchers that makes them laugh, and then I'm going to explain it per this photo, is I usually have to stand up on a chair because they're way taller than me, and I hold their head in my hands. They're looking right at me, and I put my hands on the side of their head. I go, now, I'm going to hold your head. You're looking at me. I want you to turn your entire body, use your feet to move, turn it to the left, come back to me, turn it to the right, and they start laughing. Your body rotates around the base of your skull. We are suspended off our skull. So now, look at the left photo. His head is facing the plate. Second photo, his head is facing the plate. Third photo, a little harder to see. He's now moving his body. His head hasn't moved. You really can see in the fourth frame, his body moved. He wrote, and his head now in the last frame is in the exact position it was in the first frame.
Right.
So the body rotates around the head. So yes, what you're bringing up is the connection between head position and spine. Secondly, the head is controlled. The head has, that's our little machine up there. The brain's firing everything, all the nerves, etc. Not only is it correct alignment, but when pitchers are turning towards their head towards the plate, and we talk about this when we say a pitcher picks up the target too late. Let's say he looks away and then he starts his movement and he still looked away. And then you're wondering, how does he pick up the target? The thing about what you're saying is the key training cue is for them to use their eyes. You see, people look, but they don't see. Now, when I'm filming, and I know this because, I use my naked eye because I do qualitative work. I want to see the way he looks when he walks. But when I pull out my camera and say, okay, I want to get this pitch on film, what he's doing, he'll say, did I do it right? And I'll say, I don't know. I was filming. And I always laugh to myself because I'm looking to film, but I'm not seeing what I'm looking at. And that's the same thing. And the eyes are a muscle. And anybody who's ever done eye muscle exercises because they had this or that or whatever, no, you can feel them working and you don't think about it. One of the things that pitchers do is they look, but they don't see. And yes, what you want them to see or look at, or, and I always ask pitchers, well, what do you look at? Do you look at the glove? And it's funny, they'll say, no, I look at the buckle on the side of my catcher's this, or I look at this. I go, do you look at where the ball's going to break over the plate, or do you look at where you want to put it? I mean, I'm always intrigued by their answers. And I think you know way more, what's going on around the plate. I don't, that's not my expertise. I know some, but not a lot. But whatever you want your pitcher to do with what he's supposed to look at, make sure you teach him about seeing and not looking. In fact, just say, look at this. And then when you're done, when he throws it, say, did you look at it or did you see it? And they'll go, oh, usually they'll go, okay, let me try it again. Mm-hmm. And then they see it. It's very funny. So the distinction between looking and seeing, but the eyes will keep the head level.
Yeah, it's good. It's huge.
The eyes keep the head level. So by you wanting to correct a head position, you work with the eyes, just like you said. That was so important to bring up, Larry. A genius comment. What else? What else from this show? Anything you want me to return to?
I want to go try this. I want to go lay down on the floor and mess around and tinker and to feel this, so I'll know a little bit better what I'm talking about. But it's no, I think this has been great. This is. I was just thinking which video was it? The one of him without his shirt on, from the back, from the rear, video 4, I think. Wow, that's the best one.
Oh yeah. I love this too, and I love isolating it just at the beginning. Stand up and do this, and stop right there when you get to this placement. Have the video playing and get up and do it. You're an ex-pitcher, so you know this exact thing, and then stop there and then continue on, and you'll see the perfection of that timing. So this is a timing that if you bring this in, it gives the pitchers an opportunity to bite their teeth into their motion. This has always been my thing, and it's why I teach the way I do. First of all, I had to learn the pitching motion. This is what I had to do to learn it. Secondly, I always feel that motion feels abstract to everyone. Well, when you study what I studied and you do what I do, you know that it's not abstract. And the less abstract it is, the more you can perfect it and be consistent. So what I love about this is that you can get the pitcher to bite his teeth into something that feels like one just big ball of wax to him. And the other thing I want to say, and I love what you just said, that you're going to go home and you're going to try, or you're going to, lay down and actually do this. So the three pillars that I work off of. First, you have to understand it. That's why I take the time to have you just be doing visual stuff so you can get an understanding. If you don't understand what you're looking at or why you're doing it, the rest seems a blur. Then you have to feel it. I have never given one pitcher a workout, an exercise, or a drill that I didn't feel myself, because I can't teach thoroughly, because I have to teach feel, and I can feel what the athlete is doing. So absolutely, to all the coaches, to the pitchers watching this is what's so cool. You lay down on the floor and you get after it. And you're not going to fall over. And like you said so beautifully, Larry, you got that left leg in alignment, which to me, if your stride is off, mm-hmm. you can't do this fully. And if you can't do this fully, your arm's going to come through as a victim of whatever error or weakness you had in efficiency. Am I saying that you can't get it done if you don't do it this way? No. We've got 1 million pitchers that we know, or thousands, and we've got hundreds right now that we can see on television that their mechanics look crazy, or their follow through is crazy, or they look crazy. They never seem to look crazy when they're actually releasing the ball, but they look crazy before and after. And so they've got some skill, and they've got that head for pitching where they just know how to get the ball to where it needs to go. And that's a whole different thing. So absolutely. Understand it, feel it before you try to teach it or adjust it. And then once you feel it, then you integrate it. And it's a beautiful thing. But when you see the pitcher's eyes light up, it makes it all worth it. And they do when they get the feel. So awesome. So is that it for the questions?
Yeah, that's good for me.
Okay.
This is really good. This is one of the best. It's one of the best podcasts I think you've done. This is really, really good. The information is really good.
Thank you
Really
so much. Thank you so much for that. And to everybody, be sure you listen. So what I've done in this season is try to bring the pitching motion to life and to explain it. And I've got something I'm working on for the next one. It's just a matter of if I can. It's going to be complicated, but it might be important. I'm not going to let that cat out of the bag either in case I change my mind. So we got a lot of surprises for you on the next show. So everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. And you can email me if you have any questions or topics you want covered. That's at angel@gymscience.com. You can go to my website to email me from there. That's Angel Borrelli Pitching. And while you're there, don't forget, if you want my book, which supplements this, it actually gives the kinesiology, the muscles involved. It's got a little more science to it, but it's easy, and it's a really, easy book to read. Anyway, it is on sale for you. If you made it through this episode, you deserve to have a discount on the book. So it's discounted from $47 to $27. We are in season 9, and this is episode 3. So it's S9E3. And according to my website guy, it doesn't matter if that S and E is caps or lowercase. So if you have any problem with that, just, email me and I'll take care of it right away for you. So anyway, thank you all for listening, and be sure and contact me if you have any questions.
Very good.
See you soon. Bye-bye.